Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm Nicolas Veron. It's my pleasure to introduce this session of What Now Europe, the series of Europe-related events at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Today, I couldn't be more honored. We're having Enrico Letta as a guest, and we're going to talk for once about Donald Trump and the policies of the Trump administration, how they affect Europe, how they maybe catalyze developments in Europe, and I'm looking forward to a very thought-provoking conversation with you, Enrico. You have been in European public life for a very long time. You, in your 20s, you were in the youth movement of the Christian Democratic parties at the time at the European level. You entered the Italian government as Minister for European Affairs in 1998. You were, I think, at that time, 32, the youngest minister in post-war Italy. If I'm not mistaken, you worked with major Italian public figures, Beniamino Andreatta, Massimo D'Alema, Romano Prodi, of course. You've been prime minister from 2013 to 2014, and later on also the head of the Democratic Party of Italy, the center-left party. But beyond that, you've been an academic and university leader and a leader in public policy thinking in Europe. You've been the dean of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po after your stint as prime minister. You are also now the dean of the IE School of Politics, Economics, and Global Affairs at IE University in Spain. That also illustrates between Italy, Paris, Madrid, the European dimension of your professional impact. You've also been in several corporate boards and advisory groups, but maybe most relevant to our discussion here, the president of the Jacques Delors Institute, which itself is now in several locations in Europe. And last but not least, for my long introduction, the author of the Letta report, a report much more than a market on the European internal market or single market back 2 years ago in April 2024. Not only did you publish this report at the request of the European Union, the European Commission, but also you published a book on your experiences in preparing this report and having conversations all around Europe on the single market, which is an extremely good book. I've read it in French. It's also in Italian, in English, and in Spanish, I mean, and that gives a lot of background for our conversation. But let me start with this question: How is Europe transformed by Trump? What has been his impact so far?
First of all, thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you, Nicola, for your introduction. It's really a pleasure for me. I have to say that I consider Trump really a game changer for Europe for many reasons. But I think technically, if I give a look to what I know, what I'm following the most, that is the single market and the single market integration, on this path, on how to integrate the single market, the role of Trump was very relevant because I have to say that the true acceleration in the development of the project on how to integrate the single market started with one of the most Greenland crisis was end of January, beginning of February. And I have to say that after this crisis, we had an acceleration at the European level, the 12th, March 11th, the 19th, and April the 24th, the European Council decided to move in a very, very determined direction. Packet that was the result of this acceleration on how to integrate the single market. There's a direct link, I see, between the goodwill of the European leaders to accelerate on how to strengthen the European integration and what Trump is doing from abroad. The main topic is related to the awareness of the European leaders of the big risk not being independent and autonomous as Europeans. And the fact that today we can't rely on other big powers for our dependencies, no matter if these dependencies are security-based or tech-based, on manufacturing, industrial manufacturing based, on finance or whatever. But the awareness European leaders level is dependent and to work in autonomy mode. And my report was exactly going in that direction, clearly saying that there are some fields at European level: energy, connectivity, and financial services. These are the three I focused on. These three fields are showing that Europe is too much dependent and fragmented and not independent. And so today I see the acceleration. I link this acceleration to some Trump's approaches and strategies. I don't know what will be the story for the next 2 years, but I can tell you that I see a link today between what Trump is doing and the need of the European leaders to integrate more and to be more self-sufficient. This is, for me, something that is not surprising me, because you remember, Nick, this famous quote of Jean Monnet when he said, Europe will have a federator, but the name of the federator will be need. Not a name of a person. It will be the need, the need of because of external pressures, because of and so on. This is exactly what is happening today.
So I apologize to the audience because we had some issues with the sound quality. Now I'm praying the gods of information technology so that the difficulty will be only temporary, but we could hear, Enrico, what you were saying despite the turbulence. So the picture you're painting is one of acceleration. Can you give us a little bit more of a sense of the decisions that have been made, or the decisions that you see being made in the near term to illustrate in concrete terms how there is indeed an impact of this acceleration, of this change of pace?
The plan One Europe, One Market is a plan that has been agreed by the President of the European Commission, the President of the European Council, and the President of the European Parliament. They agreed on 42 measures. These 42 measures are based on the idea to integrate the single market and to work on European competitiveness. These 42 measures have deadlines, very clear deadlines. You can find, if you Google and if you give a look to Nicosia, April 24th, One Europe, One Market, you find the 42 measures. These measures, part of them have been already presented, and they are already started their decision-making process between Parliament and Council. Others will be presented in the fall. For each measure, you will see a queue. So Q26 or Q426 or Q227. So the deadlines to get the agreement and to have the final approval. Why is that important? First, because of the agreement among the three institutions. They decided to upgrade the level of legitimacy of this initiative, and they agreed on the path and on the accelerated method. So on these topics, the three institutions, Parliament, Council, and committed to agree the initiatives and on giving both in the Parliament and in the Commission a sort of acceleration path. The other key point is, and it is not usual, by the way, having an agreement among the three institutions is not usual, a pre-agreement. The other point is related to deadlines. Deadlines are fundamental because I can tell you, Nicola, when I traveled around Europe to present the report, to discuss about the measures necessary to implement the Draghi's report, discussing with national governments, and first of all with stakeholders at national level in the different countries. The skepticism is related to the timing of the European implementing capacity. And having deadlines, binding deadlines, is, I think, very important to give credibility to this. So all what I'm telling you is, I think, good, interesting, and nice. What for me is a little bit less nice and less interesting is the fact that maybe for many of you, the first time that you heard something similar, because European institutions, European public debate, and so on, is not on these topics, is on hormones or is on many other aspects of the European public debate. So my, I would say, only, if I may say, mixed feeling is the fact that we were not good enough at European level to upgrade or to raise the level of visibility of the debate on these topics, on this event. This is why I'm so grateful to because of this opportunity to try to explain what is happening and to share the details and to also focus and underline the importance on what is taking place, because it is clear that today there is a momentum at European level because of the external pressures. Countries that were not enthusiastic pro-integration in Europe are very much pushing for a more integrated European Union. First of all, because of Trump's challenge, because of Putin's challenge, or because of China's challenge. And this external pressure is changing everything. And by the way, Nicola, if I may add one point that may anticipate one question, the demonstration of something changing is given by the what happened on trade, on international trade. The European Union on international trade in the last 4 months did more than in the last 10 years. Because if you put Australia, India, Indonesia, Mexico, and Mercosur, I repeat, 5 big agreements, Indonesia, India, Mexico, more than 1 billion people. Some of these agreements were on the table for 20 years, for 2 decades, and today the European Union signed this agreement and is ready now to implement them. And it is clear that there's a link with the tariff wars driven by Trump against Europe in the year 2025. So I think we have to be very clear and very frank and to admit that there's a clear link between the acceleration of what Europe is doing and what Trump is doing to challenge the European Union on economics, on trade, and on security. What will happen the next as a very...
We still have a couple of sound issues, but hopefully they are improving a little bit. So we'll continue on that platform with, again, apologies for the inconvenience to the audience. You mentioned the one market, one Europe, one market roadmap between the 3 institutions as a milestone, and for old observers of European matters, it inevitably has echoes of the Single European Act 40 years ago, which was a single market program, as it was called at the time, under the leadership of Jacques Delors, which led to big advances towards the European single market at 1st of January 1993. But as you highlighted, it's also a different institutional setting, right? Because here we have an interinstitutional agreement between the 3 EU institutions, Commission, Parliament, Council, as opposed to a treaty that directly binds the member states, as was the case in 1986. Can you tell us a little bit about that dynamic and how you see the member states being committed through the agency of the Council. This goes a little bit into the plumbing of our institutions in Europe, but I think very important for those purposes.
The most important difference is the fact that the Act Unique was a treaty change. And these 42 measures are not treaty changes. The 42 measures are legislative measures. What we decided to do is to keep the treaties as they are for a very, I would say, pragmatic approach. And the same approach was done by Mario Draghi in his report. Europe can't today afford an institutional discussion. Europe can't have a debate on treaty changes. You know very well that treaty changes are very complicated issues at European level because of the national approval and referenda in many countries, and the very complicated timing of any institutional and treaty changes discussion. So we decided to avoid any discussion on treaty changes, and we decided to work on the present treaties. So the upgrade that you mentioned is the way to restore the Delors method that was the successful one in between 85 and 92, and to have this package logic, if I may say. Which is the package logic? Is the fact 42 measures. You can allow all the political parties in Europe and all the member states of the European Union to have ownership of some of these measures. If you have a discussion measure by measure, you will easily conflicts or every country trying to have his own flag. Important is to have the common narrative on the 42 measures. And which is the narrative? Is the fact that we want to integrate and to pass from 27 markets to one market on connectivity, on the digital, on telecom, on energy, on the financial markets. That is a very clear narrative. Today we are 27 markets and not one in these fields. And it is a clear lack of competitiveness. I give you just one figure just to tell you why for me is so relevant, this move from 27 to 1. If you take financial markets, for instance, financial markets are fragmented in 27. We have 27 financial national authorities and so on and so forth. By the way, there is a proposal on how to integrate in a integrated system done by Nicolas Veron, and I like very much this proposal on the financial authorities. But I would like to say that the fragmentation in 27 is refraining Europe to be on finance as big as Europe is on real economy. I give you two figures that are important to understand this difference. Between Europe and the US, we play in the same championship real economy. Europe is 17% of world GDP and US is 25%. So 17% Europe, 25% the US is the same championship, is the same dimension. But when it comes to finance, and we can use as criteria the market cap, the 17% of Europe real economy becomes 11% of market cap, 11% of world market cap. The 25% of the US real economy in comparison with the rest of the world becomes 60%, 60%. And so 60 and 11 is not the same championship. 60 and 11, it is, I would say, it is really very different. And this is because of this fragmentation. So the most important part of this project is related to the fact that there are moves to try to integrate these three big markets, and there are some facilitators, some enablers. The most important one is the so-called 28 regime. One of the 42 measures is the so-called 28 regime. The Commission decided to use the name EU Inc., UINC, and this EUINC is the way to give European companies and companies that want to invest in Europe from abroad a single, simple droit des affaires, commercial law, corporate law, that can allow each company to move from one country to another without changing corporate law. Someone in the US named this idea sort of European Delaware, is the way to say Europe is trying to use a sort of passepartout. And the idea of the name 28 regime, I named it 28 regime in my report, is because of the fact that the European Union has 27 countries, and the idea is not to cancel the 27 corporate laws, to have one, because it will be unfeasible for political reasons, but to have 28, to create a sort of 28th virile state with his own corporate law, and to use it and to have it valid everywhere in Europe. So yes, the idea is to be very concrete with these measures. So among the 42 measures, you find the Savings and Investments Union, you find public procurement, the possibility to have public procurement, a single market. You have the circular single market at European level. Plenty of very concrete measures. Some of them started the process, the legislative process. I think I strongly stress the importance of the 28 regime, because it's the way to really simplify the system at European level, and the system is very complicated at European level. So is the way also to give a big message. I can tell you, Nicolas, I was in an important marketplace, a financial marketplace, and in Asia some weeks ago. I met investors, and the only question they asked me was the date in which they will be able to use the 28 regime to organize their company in Europe with a 28 regime company, instead of having 10 or 12 or 15 national companies. So I think it is really a game changer. It's something very important, and I guess that this acceleration today is giving also the sense of a great opportunity, maybe the last chance. I don't see another opportunity in 10 years, because I think the decline of the European Union is based on dimensions, and our fragmentation is weakening our competitiveness because of the other giants in the world, and we have to work in that direction. So I hope this acceleration will take place, and I have to say that I don't know what will be the movie of next year, of the year 27, if Trump will continue to put pressure to Europe or to mobilize the integration of the European leaders, but that will help. That would help if he is able to continue in that direction. I know I don't like very much what Trump is doing, but there's a side effect that is incredibly positive for Europe.
So thank you, Mr. Trump. But let me follow up on that. You also mentioned other pressures, right? You mentioned Putin, you mentioned China. Obviously, what's happening on the eastern border of Europe, on the front line between Ukraine and Russia, is immensely consequential. And indeed, the evolution of the war dynamics between Ukraine and Russia have direct read across to EU policies, and the China pressure is also extremely strong. So maybe it's a futile question, but how do you disentangle the pressures that comes from the US, from the pressures that comes from Russia, China, maybe other pressure points, and how do you think of the causality between what Trump has been doing? You mentioned Greenland very prominently, and the dynamics of policymaking that you see inside the European Union and in the different member states?
I think the three are playing a different role, but there's a sort of synergy, there's a sort of combination, because it is clear that everything started with the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That is clear. This security and energy issue, because the two were linked. We suddenly, in this February 22, discovered what we know very well, what we knew very well, that Europe was completely fragmented on energy, with some countries totally independent. Of course, I mean France first, with the nuclear, or other countries with the renewables, like Nordic countries or like Spain, and other countries like my country or like Germany or like Greece, very, very much independent on very much dependent on the Russian and on the fossil supply. And I think it is something that was a first strong wake-up call. The other one was, of course, on security. But then the wake-up call that from Trump was a more global one, because it was, first of all, on trade. I mentioned before how this wake-up call on trade was something, I would say, obliging the European leaders to overcome the obstacles that in the past blocked the agreements with Mercosur and India. India and Mercosur were 2 decades discussions. And then in Brussels, they decided to move and to finalize these discussions, I repeat, with Australia, with Mercosur, and with Mexico. And other agreement will arrive. So I think that was the other first step. And then the rest, of course. Today, there's a big technological discussion. I mentioned one point that was maybe in the US not very much considered, but the relevance of the case, of the issue for the judge of the penal court in Europe. He was, I would say, banned from the US because of his decision, or the decision of the court on Netanyahu. But this ban had a consequence of the possibility for this person to use American platforms. And when you are banned from using American platforms on digital payments, for instance, you immediately, suddenly understand that there's a sort of American monopoly on these topics. And this is for digital payments, this is for I would say, technological identity and digital identities, and so on. So that was another big accelerator. You know that in Europe, there's today this raising discussion on the digital euro that the European Central Bank is driving, exactly to, as consequence, as reactions to what was happening on this side. And Trump, I would say, aggression to Europe, political aggression to Europe, was for some aspects also totally unexpected on some feelings. My country, for instance, Italy, the Italian government, that was one of the most pro-Trump government, moved the day after Trump's attack to the Pope in Italy. I remember very well the storm arrived when Trump decided to attack the Pope, and for a country like Italy, that was inconceivable. And so you put everything together. Of course, Greenland, all the Nordic part of Europe, was suddenly shocked by what happened on Greenland. But I add, and you mentioned it, China too. China is also the other key pillar of all this discussion. Within the 42 measures, you find also the Industrial Accelerator Act. And you know very well, Nicola, that the Industrial Accelerator Act is the most important industrial policy tool at the European level since many years. It is mostly to try to oblige the Chinese to, I would say, to move towards more reciprocity, because it is clear that on many issues today, the Chinese competitiveness is challenging Europe. And that means for many issues that the European Union has to react, has to scale. I insist on the word scale. Scale is maybe the most important word of Draghi's report and on my report. We need to scale up. We need to scale up on the different issues because our fragmentation is the way to I would say, to limit European competitiveness tools at national champions, not with European champions. And the lack of European champions is the main problem for the European competitiveness dimension matters. And this is, of course, for the relationship with China, for the relationship with the US. But it is not just that. I have to say that everything today is related to dimensions. One topic, interesting topic, is related to security and what happened with Russia. And maybe I add a reflection that maybe will make someone smiling. But I saw a big acceleration also on this because of what is happening around Europe. Because the Russian aggression to Ukraine that is continuing obliged the Ukrainians to invest very much in technology on defense.
That's right.
And today, the drone industry is something that is astonishing in terms of results from the Ukrainian side. And I can tell you, this is my personal reflection. I just want to say that today there is a different approach in many European capitals towards Ukraine's accession to the European Union. That was considered 1 year ago as very difficult, very unlikely. Today, Ukraine's accession to the European Union gains ground and is, for me, considered as one of the concrete options for the future. First of all, because of technology and because of security. Because the European countries suddenly understood that we are not today able to ensure European security alone without the US because of the lack of integrated European defense system, integrated European defense industry. And what the Ukraine is doing is something that is impressing very much many European observers and many European capitals. I think that can be another interesting way to develop this discussion about the external pressures that are changing the way in which internally we are discussing about our future.
And certainly the changes in military leadership in Ukraine in the last few days illustrate very vividly what you're talking about. I'm not going into digression about this, but indeed the importance of the Ukrainian drone industry and battlefield successes really has reshaped many things in recent times. But I want to point to the tensions that exist in what you referred to also in the Draghi report. Of course, two reports, yours on the single market and Draghi's on competitiveness, came in the same year, 24, and were very much bundled into the discussion among heads of state and government. You mentioned the advances that the EU is making towards more free trade in response to the Trump protectionism, the agreements with Mercosur, etc. But at the same time, you mentioned the need to reduce dependencies, the Industrial Acceleration Act, which are often portrayed as, if not protectionist, at least a form of European mercantilism that is indeed a response to Chinese mercantilism and now US mercantilism. You mentioned dialogue and friction, frankly, with China in the context of the Industrial Accelerator Act. So we see, and this was very much a criticism that was lobbed at the Draghi report in particular, more than at yours, on whether Draghi was kind of throwing the baby of Europe's commitment to free trade and competitive neutrality in international matters with the bathwater of, to put the long story short, the transatlantic relationship. What how do you see this friction between mercantilism and openness in the current European movement? We see free trade agreements, we see controls on domestic content and export controls also for security matters. How is the EU going to reconcile this almost diametrically opposing forces?
I think that will be the most important topic and discussion in the next months within the European Union. I think you correctly framed the discussion. And the discussion is a discussion where in Europe you have very different approaches. And it will be a sort of, I would say, bras de fer among the different European leaders. And it will be a topic of influence. It is clear that there's a French position that is today a very strong position and very profile position in which the defense of European industry is the most important and the most
that's
relevant.
Mercantilist, essentially, right? That's a new mercantilist stance.
Yeah, very, very, I would say, defensive approach, and with China in a very, I would say, aggressive approach with China. I see a different approach from other countries, the other, I would say, big European countries, Germany, Italy, Poland, maybe. Then you have other countries that are today more on an open approach. The traditional Nordic countries, or I have to say the Netherlands, for instance, but also Spain today is a country with a very open approach. Spain was the leading country within Europe on the Mercosur agreement, and Spain has an approach today toward China that is the more open approach towards China. So it is clear that the discussion is open and the positions are different. I think we have to keep Europe open, and we have to keep the capability of Europe to work in an open space. So I'm very pro free trade. Of course, we have to elaborate and to focus on the word reciprocity, because free trade without reciprocity is a suicide, and we have to know how does it mean. But it's in general, my point on your question, Nicolas, is related to the problem of having 27 positions towards China. That is, in my view, independent on the content of the position, if I may say. So the key point is to have a convergent unitarian position. That is the big need, because if we are not able to go towards the Chinese with a common position, and we go discussing with the Chinese, each country with his different position, and each prime minister flying to Beijing and discussing bilaterally with the Chinese, we are dead. This is very clear for me. And this is the most important and most relevant point. We have to be united. And each country has to concede something, has to compromise. It's better to be united on a different position that is not 100% the position of your country, rather than having your position 100%, you agree 100% with your position, but we not united and 27, because it is clear that the irrelevance is what will condemn us. So my answer to your question is the fact that I am afraid that the leaders will fatigue in finding this common position. They started last week in having a first discussion at the level of ministers of foreign affairs, but I urge European leaders to be generous and long view, not only generous.
So in a way, what you're saying is, if I hear you well, that China has been more successful than Russia or the US under Donald Trump at keeping the Europeans divided, right?
Yes, I have to say yes. And I have also to add that in this very moment, for the European leaders, the relationship with China is a complicated one, because if you go if you deep dive and you give a look to the polls in many European countries on how Chinese are perceived, how Russians are perceived, and how Americans are perceived, today you have a lot of surprises. And the surprises are related to, of course, a very marginal positive approach to Russians. Russia is paying a price and will pay a price for this crazy decision to invade Ukraine. There's a degringolade. There's a big drop of all the polls related to the US. And if you give a look to what is happening on China, in many countries, China is raising in the, I would say, good approach on the good feeling, positive feeling in the public opinion. And that will not help leaders in trying, of course, to have an industrial accelerator act more restrictive or things like that. It's not easy. In my view, you correctly pointed at this topic, because it will be one of the most controversial elements. Also, because with Trump is easier. Trump is against Europe, so he's obliging the European leaders to be united. Putin is against Europe, so it's very easy. Xi Jinping doesn't seem to be against Europe. He wants to be open. He has a positive approach. So it's not easy for the European leaders to find a common position, but it is existential to find a common strategic position on. And it is not like that. You see the difference between the Commission approach and some member states' approach. Among the different member states, it's so evident that there's a very different language and very different code language.
So I'd like to come back finally to what we were discussing about Ukraine and the drone industry and the, of course, issue of paramount importance of security, and on the economic side, weapons procurement, defense investments for security. I haven't looked at the One Europe, One Market roadmap on whether among the 42 measures, how much of it is about defense and defense procurement, but it remains a very difficult area. And what we see is that the discussions in Europe are very uncertain, not just as to how much of this Europeans want to do together. We saw the collapse of a number of French-German projects and so on, but also whether the EU is relevant to that, because obviously there are lots of things we want to do with the UK, with Canada, with Ukraine, maybe with Turkey and other partners, not even mentioning, Switzerland and Norway. So, and conversely, inside the EU, there are 4 neutral countries that will not participate in some security initiatives as long as they remain neutral. So there is really an issue of perimeter, and where does the EU stand? Is it the right space? Is it the right scope for thinking about the single market for security-related issues? And of course, since many things are dual use, security-related is kind of everything. How do you think about that? Should the EU be one also for security? Is that realistic? Is it going to happen? Are we doomed to fail and have a kind of non-security related segments united in Europe more and more, but security related divided or with different geographies? Let's conclude with that.
In reality, traditionally, the single market is not defense. Defense is out of the single market by definition because of the intergovernmental, I would say, method that dominates in everything is related to defense. But I wanted in the report to dedicate a chapter to this, launching a proposal, and the proposal is going exactly in the direction of what you mentioned. So the proposal is to build up a common market of defense. So in the moment in which we move from the single market to the one market, so a totally integrated market for all the rest, we can build up a common market of defense. Is the way to have on board the British, is the way to have on board Norway or other countries. I think it is essential because it is clear that today we have to be pan-European. on defense. And so my answer to your question is that I see it as a pan-European response. Some issues need agreements country by country, but what is important is not to do as the Germans did. That is exactly the opposite of what we need to do. We need to have agreements, national agreement, transnational agreements, as the French and the Italians did, for instance, on satellites. I think Thales, Airbus, and Leonardo together is a very good signal. We have to do the same in the other fields. Is fundamental, and scale up there is absolutely crucial.
Enrico Letta, thank you so much. The gods of IT have partly heard my prayers, so we had better quality in the second half of this discussion than in the first half. Thank you, deities. And I'm influenced by the current pagan vibes of Odyssey. And thank you so much for sharing your insights, very inspiring and also so provoking inputs into the discussion about European matters. Have a great summer also to our audience, and see you again in September.
Thank you.